The Circular Momentum Show, the premier podcast and information source for leaders in the IT asset disposition and IT reseller community. With a focus on growth strategies, IT lifecycle services, and making sustainability profitable and beneficial to the environment.
Welcome back to the Circular Momentum Show. I'm your host, Pete Paisley, and today we're picking up with part 2 with David Daoud from Compliance Standards, a leading industry analyst. And we're starting back with an important conversation about some of the most recent data around industry growth and what that means for all operators in the ITAD space as they work to build their company valuations. We'll also touch base on other timely topics such as technical debt on the enterprise balance sheet and how emerging technical issues are creating opportunities for ITAD. David, I'm going to point to another article you recently wrote talking about how leading service providers in the sector are expected to focus on, quote, improving and proving verifiable sanitization across modern components, including downstream transparency, battery risk management, and audit-ready telemetry. These are some of the areas you highly recommended ITAD's focus on in 2026, or risk facing quiet exclusion from enterprise deals. Could you tell us more about battery risk management concerns?
Yes, of course. Battery risk is something that I began seeing about a year ago. So this is relatively new for me. You know, when I started paying attention is when I started ordering PCs or laptops via Amazon, and I realized they didn't ship by plane. They shipped everything by, trucks. And so this is certainly, in my opinion, one of those issues that has been quietly building for years. And now it's becoming a front and center compliance and liability issue. I've learned about this by finalizing a report with a couple of my colleagues we're starting to track now the reverse logistics business from the logistics perspective. And that is a front and center issue. And we thought, well, how is it possible that it hasn't really been front and center in the ITAD space? The core problem there is very simple. It's that lithium-ion batteries that we use on a daily basis, right? What happened to them is they degrade over time in ways that are not always visible externally. And degraded batteries, as you know, in storage or in transit, create real fire problem and safety risks. So we've seen high-profile incidents at recycling and processing facilities. It's been reported all over the map. Resource Recycling and East Crap News have been doing a lot of that kind of reporting. And insurers, very important folks, they're paying really close attention. And so from a practical standpoint, there is certainly a need to have documented processes for identifying, segregating, that's very important, and handling devices with compromised batteries. And they need to be able to demonstrate those processes to enterprise clients who are increasingly including battery risk in their due diligence.
Hey, audit-ready telemetry. We're also hearing about the ability for ITADs to capture telemetry data from GPU-based servers. Can you comment on that? Is that what you were kind of referring to in your article, perhaps?
Yes, partly for sure. And yes, this is absolutely another super exciting development for the industry. And here's why. The GPU-based servers, the servers that are used specifically in what's called AI training and inference workloads, those GPU servers contain an extraordinary amount of what I would call operational data. Think of utilization rates, think of thermal history, think of memory logs, power consumption patterns, all that stuff. That telemetry data is extremely valuable, as you know, in a million ways. It helps establish the source and the provenance and the condition history of the assets for remarketing. So that's very important. It supports things that the sector has been doing for decades: data, sanitization, verification. And it's increasingly being requested by downstream buyers who want documented evidence of this history before they even buy these high value compute equipment. The broader point about audit ready telemetry goes obviously beyond the GPU. This is not just a GPU story. I picked GPU for servers as an example, but enterprise clients, particularly in regulated industry, as industries with finance, healthcare, etc., they're certainly under enormous pressure to demonstrate what ITADs have been doing for a long time, which is the chain of custody and the data destruction verification across their entire disposed asset base. And that's where structured, auditable telemetry data plays a big role compared to what I showed you earlier, like a certificate of destruction. That's the big difference, and it's where telemetry plays. It's data. It's no longer, a static document for sure.
Yeah, and it does make me think that, honestly, many ITADs for a lot of products, they do some pretty basic testing. So I think this will change some of their processes to capture that telemetry data off these high-end GPUs that they're processing for their remarketing side
Absolutely.
of the business.
And the data is a marketable asset.
Yeah.
I mean, companies are willing to buy that stuff. So if you're investing in it thinking, okay, well, this is going to be just to support the client. Well, yes, it's going to support the client. And guess what? The client is going to pay for it. And so it's a win-win, really.
Well, I'm wondering, though, if it doesn't have personally identifiable information that the original owner enterprise account might need to delete before they let the equipment off site. Is telemetry data going to be treated like any other user data and get wiped?
Now that's interesting. So yeah, I think the rules of the book are still being written, and
Yeah.
what's out there, it's going to be a combination of common sense thinking and cases of breaches or cases of problem that will bubble up over time that are going to be sort of injected into a process, a standard, and etc. But yeah, that's a very valid point.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn more on that to get more up to speed. So you also mentioned in that same report, I believe, downstream transparency. Are there some emerging issues here around downstream transparencies for ITADs?
Well, yeah, I mean, downstream transparency has been a persistent issue and challenge in this industry for a long time, right? And I think the stakes are getting higher over time. And this is classic issues are well known, right? Assets that are supposed to be destroyed showing up in secondary markets. I mean, you've seen that taking place in Malaysia and other places. Data bearing devices moving through multiple downstream handlers without documentation. And of course, we know of recycling claims that can never be verified. So those problems have not gone away. They're a permanent fixture for now. The emerging issues are layered on top of these problems. First, as asset values rise, due to the component shortages that we know, the financial incentives for diverting high value assets away from their intended disposition paths increase. So, you're going to have people sort of holding, and then they're going to have incentive to, move those assets in ways that they're not supposed to be intended to. So I think serious ITAD companies will need some robust downstream audit programs, precisely because the temptation to cut corners goes up substantially when memory modules, for instance, as we are facing now, memory modules, storage components are worth significantly more than they were a year ago, right? So, what happens now? Secondly, what's interesting as well is enterprise clients are also increasingly being asked by their own regulators, their own auditors, their stakeholders, et cetera, to demonstrate, downstream accountability, not just to get a certification from their ITAD. Those days when a single document discharged the enterprise responsibility, have essentially ended in many sectors.
All right, David, one more. On February 19th, you published an analysis titled How Sims and Iron Mountain Are Repricing the ITAD Industry and Positioning It as a Primary Growth Engine. In that article, you mentioned how both companies recently reported approximately 70% year-over-year growth in their ITAD operations. Wow. And how these represent eye-opening or eye-watering growth rates, right? So here's some of the other interesting data points you shared in the report. Iron Mountain said that asset lifecycle management is on track for $850 million in 2026 revenues and growing 5 times faster than the rest of the company.
Mhm.
They also said
Amazing.
memory pricing alone created a 15 to 20 million positive swing in a single quarter within the $190 million segment. Wow. And Sims described hyperscale clients accelerating decommissioning to recover DDR4 modules for reuse. To that, you said that is a signal. Decommissioning is now part of supply chain strategy. Then you went on to say ITAD has entered the compute cycle not about scrap recovery, but about constrained component sourcing, and that changes everything. My first question, so the memory market is upending the ITAD enterprise business as it currently represents up to half the revenue of retired assets. I mean, those are numbers I'm hearing from folks in the business. Do you see this lasting, or does this feel like a peak right now?
Well, the numbers are extraordinary to begin with, Pete. This is something really interesting. I think your question is sort of the most important question in the industry currently, and of course, it's a strategic one when you look at sort of the long run, short, midterm, and long run, in general. I want to be direct about it. What Sims and Iron Mountain have reported, in my opinion, is not a cyclical bump. It certainly reflects a structural shift in how enterprise IT decommissioning is being analyzed, valued, communicated. When I say memory pricing alone moved the needles by $15 to $20 million in a single quarter for I think a $190 million segment, and when hyperscale clients are accelerating decommissioning, especially to recover DDR4 modules for reuse, this means that you're looking at a fundamental change in the economics of disposition. Decommissioning, in my opinion, has entered what I put in the article, a supply chain conversation at the very high level of the C-suite, and that is very different place than it has historically occupied, for sure. Will it last at this intensity? Well, you've been in this business for a long time. We know that component pricing cycles always correct eventually, up and down, right? DDR4 will at some point be superseded broadly enough that the recovery value will diminish. That's inevitable. The broader structural shift, in my opinion, the recognition that decommissioning IT assets that are going out into the decommissioning phase are a supply chain resource. They're a supply chain resource. They're not necessarily a disposal problem, and that's that's unlikely to reverse. That thinking, once embedded in how procurement and operation teams approach the IT life cycle, tends to persist. This is something that's going to last for a long time. So I would characterize the current moment as a peak in component-driven revenue intensity, but the beginning of a long-term elevation in how ITAD is valued and positioned strategically in general.
And that's good for the market. So that's a very positive thing. Another data point in your article that was of interest to me was that Iron Mountain now serves, you estimated, 360 clients within the Fortune 1000 space, inferring that the other 640 companies are open territory. So let's start with this. And we had another discussion where we talked about how much market penetration in that space that the OEMs like the Lenovo's and the IBMs and HPs have. But if I'm an ITAD calling on those, first of all, on those 360 Iron Mountain clients, what do I need to do to switch them? If you had to give me a magic bullet that you'd want to be armed with, if you were calling for an ITAD and this enterprise customer said, well, I'm doing business with Iron Mountain.
That's a tough one. And here's why. Switching an established Iron Mountain relationship is absolutely difficult. I would not say it's impossible. It's difficult. And ITADs should go in that conversation with clear eyes about this. Iron Mountain brings a number of things that their competitors don't. They bring the brand recognition, scale, the geographic coverage, and of course, increasingly they bring sophisticated reporting capabilities.
Yeah.
That's difficult to displace. Competing on those dimensions directly is not a winning strategy.
Okay.
Where an ITAD can win is on a number of things that, I think we've spoken about them earlier, but I can cite three things. First is this concept of specialization. If you have deep expertise in a vertical, let's say that Iron Mountain serves in general terms or in generic terms, if you will, think of healthcare, government, financial services, you can position that expertise as something a large generalist providers can't match. So that specialization is very important.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that I would advise an ITAD company is what I call relationship intimacy. Iron Mountain at scale is necessarily somewhat transactional. A mid-sized regional ITAD can offer the sustainability director or the IT asset manager a level of responsiveness. Think of customization, think of direct relationship that a large national provider cannot offer structurally. And that's very important. So they can play those relationships at a smaller level. And third, of course, there's the economics, right? The large providers generally have large overhead structures. On the right deal, a leaner operator can offer better, potentially much better net recovery value or more favorable processing economics. So the key here is to be, lack of a better word, surgical about which of those 360 accounts are actually vulnerable and why, rather than treating them sort of an equivalent, all an opportunity to get. So that's to me where the differentiation happens for sure.
All great points, David. Lastly, on this topic, you brought up that we should expect to see even more increased capital flows into our industry because of these amazing data points coming out that we're seeing, driven largely by memory, but overall growth in the industry, which will increase valuations for most of the operators. But these capital flows are coming in and there's not many sellers right now. What do you think ITAD should do to kind of build their enterprise value as they wait for the optimal time?
Very valid point. Very valid question, Pete. In fact, I've been working with companies that are looking to purchase ITAD firms, and they're struggling finding the right one. They're struggling finding the right one, and then when they find one, the conditions are very difficult, expensive, etc. But what they can do, what an ITAD CEO or an owner of an ITAD company can do, they can do several things for sure. But the window to act may be shorter than most operators realize. So the first thing, and I'm going to speak to them here directly, is get your financial reporting in order. That is the first starting point. Why? Because the companies that acquire and the investors, they're paying premium multiples for ITAD businesses in current conditions, but they're also doing serious due diligence, and I work with them. And so, and I'm trying to express what they feel. Clean, audited financials with clear revenue segmentation by service line are table stakes for a premium valuation conversation. You have to have that. If you don't have that, it's a non-starter.
Yeah.
Secondly, what I would recommend is diversify your revenue mix away from pure commodity processing and towards contracted recurring service revenues.
Mm-hmm.
For example, a business with 40% of revenue under multi-year contracts, that would command certainly a meaningful higher multiple than one that is entirely transactional. And, you can go to an investor and say, oh, I did this and this and that, but what's the future? Well, big question mark. If it's the opposite, I've done this, but you know what? We have contracts that are going to renew every year, and here's the proof of it. Definitely much, much bigger value. The third, and two more after that, invest in the reporting and the telemetry infrastructure that we've talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's because technology-enabled ITADs are being valued differently than manual processing operations. And that's a very important point. Fourth, document your customer relationships formally. Handshake relationships with enterprise clients are worth, as you know, significantly a lot less in acquisition conversation than the ones that you document through service agreements and contracts, etc. So it can't be just an ad hoc thing. And we have a client here that's using us. Here are the contracts, and it's all documented. Finally, a quick one. Think carefully about where you fit, which dimension of the market you want to be playing or you want to own before you go to that market, because buyers are going to pay you to help them in terms of clarity of position as much as they're going to pay you for revenue. Of course, know your story and be able to tell that story is very important. So 5 things to me, good starting points.
All excellent points. And in this age right now of increasing valuations, very important points for operators as they grow their businesses. David, I'm afraid we've used all the time we had allocated today, but very insightful commentary. And I appreciate you spending some time with us in the Circular Momentum Show, and look forward to doing it again soon and covering some other important topics.
It was my pleasure, Pete. Thank you again. Like you said, let's do that again. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the Circular Momentum Show. I'm Pete Paisley, and I hope you found value in some of the critical insights with David Daoud on OEM market dynamics, enterprise ITAD strategies, and the competitive landscape shaping our industry's future. If you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe to stay updated on the trends and strategies driving circular IT forward. For more resources and insights, visit our website at www.circmo.com. Until next time, keep the momentum going.
You've been listening to the Circular Momentum Show. Thanks for joining us. Don't miss our next episode coming soon, where we feature market leaders in the IT asset disposition and reseller community. Thanks to our sponsors, MG Environmental. And special thanks to our guests and growth strategy consultants, Circular Momentum. The Circular Momentum Show is produced and written by